Okay, we're in volume 7 of the book set that I got, Bible Story by Arthur S Maxwell. My books are all blue. They're 70 years old. They may have not been opened for 50 years. This volume 7 has Mary and a toddler Jesus on the front, and it looks like Jerusalem. And then on the back, it has, oh, it's not a hammer. I couldn't tell because this right here kind of looks like a hammer. So it's he actually has chips in his hand and chips at his feet and the plane right here. I correct myself if I said it, he had a hammer and a plane, because if you look and the way I'm looking at it, I just see the what looks in the shape of a hammer. But it turned out that this is actually shavings that he was brushing off. Okay? We are in part 2, story 4, teaching the teachers. That's what it says. Sorry, I had to make sure because it felt uneven. Okay. My book felt uneven. Okay. As Mary, Joseph, and Jesus drew near to Jerusalem, the highway became more and more crowded than ever. Jesus had never seen so many people in his life. Thousands upon thousands were into the moving into the city from all directions for the Passover service. As he as he caught sight of the city and saw the temple standing on Mount Moriah, he was greatly stirred. Old Bible stories that his mother had taught him from his childhood suddenly took a new meaning. How wonderful to be looking at the very place where Abraham offered up Isaac, where David defeated the Jebusites, and Solomon reigned in all his glory. Here the prophets of God had spoken for thousands of years and more. Yes, and someday Messiah would come to this city. He would ride upon a colt, a foal of a donkey. This time it does have that word that I'm not going to say. As Zechariah had prophesied. Well, may Jesus had said to himself, someday, in God's good time, I will ride along this road and through these very gates. Inside at last, the Holy Family were soon very busy. Robot voice again, I can feel it, but I digress. They had to find a place to stay, buy food, and then go on to the temple, where the first Passover service were about to begin. Jesus watched everything with wide open eyes, for it was all so new to him. He wondered why there were so many poor people, so many beggars, so many sick, and his loving heart went out to them all. He wanted to help them, and I expect Mary and Joseph had a hard time keeping him from giving away every penny he had brought with him. Yeah, yeah, would be true, because he probably did have offering to give, because they always had offering, or were supposed to bring an offering. When they arrived to the temple, Jesus was surprised to find it looked more like a cattle market than a place of worship. Merchants were selling oxen, sheep, lambs, and birds to people who had come to worship. Money changers were noisily arguing with visitors about exchange rates. which is true. So it looked more, instead of being a church, it looked more like a marketplace. Um, and this is the illustration there. That's why when I was growing up, we really couldn't say anything if we were selling anything. We really weren't supposed to do it in the church, um, because of this story. And they, and then it wasn't right for us to do it. So that's how I was taught. Anyway, okay. But why do they do it here? I can hear Jesus saying to Mary, "It's not right, mother. It's not right." "I know, dear," Mary may have said, "but they have done it so long that nobody thinks there's anything wrong about it," which is true. Well, even now we don't realize, and I tried not to do it. But the scripture said, "My house shall be called a house of prayer, not a shambles, not a shambles like this." Okay, okay, that's what he told Mary. Because, okay, so sometimes when you jump off and then get back, and you have to go back 70 years, it throws me off. Okay, okay, back to the story. To a boy brought up as Jesus had been, it might have been a terrible shock to find such things going on in the holy temple. But it was only the first of many disappointments he suffered. He saw rich people dropping gold and silver coins into the offering box with a loud noise, then look around to make sure their gift had been noticed, and he didn't like it. He saw poor people made to wait just because they were poor, and he didn't like that either. Worse still was the formal way in which the sacrifices were offered. Most of the people were doing it because it was a custom, and not because deep down in their hearts they were sorry for their sins. As days slipped by, Jesus longed more and more to talk to some of the priests and ask them about these things and all the other questions he had kept in his heart for so long. At last his chance came. There was a room in the temple building where young people were taught by rabbis during the big feast. While his parents were busy elsewhere, Jesus found his way there, and sitting down among other boys of his age, looking up at the bearded old teacher with repart attention. So he looked up at the teacher. He found a classroom, and he sat down, and he looked and he listened. Never had he been so happy. This was what he had longed for. Pretty soon his hand shot up, so he started asking questions. "I have a question," he said, the lad with the bright eyes and the open and earnest face. "Certainly, my boy," the teacher said. "What is it?" Then came the first question, which showed such a knowledge of subject that the teacher was shocked. "I wish I knew what that question was, don't you? Somehow I feel sure that it had to do with the prophecies about the Messiah." The teacher may have said that the Messiah would come and reign as a king in glorious splendor. And Jesus may have asked, but what about the prophecy in Isaiah? He was wounded for our transgression. He was bruised for our iniquities. As the rabbi answered, Jesus came back with another question and another, each one more pointed than the last. And then, of course, it has him, and it looks like, the character here looks like they're doing this with their hands, getting angry, which would be the truth. But he's a little kid; they wouldn't have, noticed. And so this is the illustration here, and you can definitely see his hands um, are in a position of slight anger. But you got to think, he's 13. Nobody, or 12, 13. Nobody's gonna listen to a little kid, especially in that time frame. Okay, okay. Other rabbis drifted in to see what was going on, and stayed and listened to this remarkable child who knew the Holy Scriptures so well and seemed aware of hidden meaning these famous teachers had never thought about before. So he was saying things that they didn't even think about. After a while, they began to ask him questions. Where where were you born? In Bethlehem of Judah. Where do you live? In Nazareth of Galilee. Where do you go to school? I don't go to school. Then how do you learn the scriptures so well? My mother taught me. You know, her cousin being a Levite, and then her being in lineage, and her being so faithful. Okay, let's get back to the story. Then they asked him more questions to see how much he knew about the writings of patriarchs and prophets, and Jesus never missed one of them. So quickly and right were his answers that they were all amazed. The Bible said that all that heard him were astonished at his understanding and answers. Hour after hour they talked together with like this. Nobody got tired or hungry. So they pretty much had a jam session because you know going and listening to just being around musicians when they have a jam session, time flies. Just like whenever I'm doing a painting and I'm not thinking, time flies. Okay, let's get back to the story. The Passover service came to an end, and thousands of visitors began to go home. Passover is really for a week. But the priests and rabbis stayed with this young lad from Nazareth who had stirred their hearts as no one else had done in many a long day. As for Jesus, he was enjoying himself so much that it never dawned on him that his parents might already have been on their way to Galilee. But they were, and soon they would be hunting for him all over Jerusalem. Yeah, they. I think the story is they were 3 days out, and Nazareth is 4 days away, 4 or 5 days away from Bethlehem to get to Galilee. So he was there for 3 days. And we have a painting by William Hutchison, 1956, on here. And as I say, it's the printing. not my camera. And there is him talking to the rabbis and the learned people in the church. And you notice that they're opening the scrolls, and he's telling them off memory. And if you want to put it in nowadays, he probably had, if you wanted to, that Jesus had a photographic mind, but he's the creator, so he knew all of it anyway. And then it has right here, after the Passover service had come to an end, Jesus slipped away from his parents and went to the temple to reason with the rabbis. They marveled at his knowledge of the scriptures, which, they would be. And that is the end of part 2, story 4. And of course, the break, and we'll be back in just a bit.